Welcome to Inside Missions, a production of Maranatha Volunteers International, offering an in-depth look at the people, the cultures, and the countries where Maranatha is working. I'm Dustin Comm, and today I'm joined by Maranatha volunteer Nancy Davis. Nancy, welcome to Inside Missions.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
Nancy, you've gotten very involved with Maranatha recently, but you also have a lifelong connection to missions. You grew up in various different countries. What was life like for you as a missionary kid? Where did you grow up, and what were some of the memories that you have of that?
Well, I was 11 when we first went overseas, and we went to Thailand, to Bangkok, at Bangkok Sanitarium and Hospital. And then later we went to Mountain View College in the Philippines. And after that, we were down in Trinidad in the Caribbean. But growing up as a missionary kid, I guess really didn't seem different. It was just life. And yeah, it was an adventure, but life always was an adventure.
Do you remember when your parents told you that you were going to move to Thailand?
I think so, but it wasn't like this bombshell of anything that just like, oh, wow, what is this going to be like? It was truly going to be a new adventure and a family. So
you were up for it?
Yes,
you were excited
very much
about it.
So.
Had you ever lived in a big city? I mean, Bangkok is a huge city.
I probably didn't realize how big it was going to be, but no, we lived in College Place, which is a small town, and that's where I had been for
in
the
Washington
last
State,
in Washington State, and it was a small town, so I had no idea. So I was pretty naive.
What were some of the biggest things that you remember about that big city and being in this new country as an 11-year-old?
A lot of people. Traffic was crazy. We lived on a compound, so we were inside a walled little village kind of, and but somehow it just, maybe we just rolled with it, and it just went. I didn't feel uncomfortable. It was just okay. It was fun.
Kids are pretty adaptable, right? I mean,
yeah.
And you had two brothers,
I have two
older brothers, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what was some of the most fun aspects of being a missionary kid? Like, do you remember anything that you think that probably was unique when you think about how other kids grow up?
Well, living on a hospital compound, the hospital was just a stone's throw away from where our house was. And so the weather was hot and the windows would be open, so you would hear the patients and different things too. But we were able to go into the hospital frequently, if we needed to go find our parents. My dad would be working somewhere close by. Mom would be in the food service, and we would be able to go in. If we had a owie, we would go find one of the other missionary doctors. They were our surrogate parents, really. We were raised by everybody, and we would just go in and wander around, and it was great. We always had activities going on. We'd play kick the can on the compound, and especially at night was so much fun. Just have the whole compound. We could be anywhere on the campus, so long as we were within the walls.
So you were pretty self-sufficient.
We were.
At that age.
Our parents worked so much that sometimes we thought, we didn't have parents, but yet we had a cook who was pretty much over us, and she made sure we were doing our homework and coming home in the evening and behaving ourselves somewhat, but it was great.
Was there a school for missionary kids? Okay. So
you were right on the
school
compound.
In English at that location.
Yeah. 2 rooms.
Yeah. What was it like, I'm sure there was some times maybe where there were some challenges, or maybe something went wrong. Was there any moment that you can remember where you had problems that arose that you had to deal with as a family?
I think the hardest was that we went for a 5-year term, and during that time, my mom's brother passed away, and of course we didn't have cell phones, anything. It was a telegram to give us the bad news, or they would try and make a phone call and the disconnect, there was just bad connections. And those were when you felt, being separated from a family was really challenging. But otherwise, we were pretty adaptable.
Did you get to interact with local kids much?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We did. Learn to speak Thai. Of course, our house cleaner and the cook were Thai, so we learned to speak. And if you went out in the market, you would speak. Yeah. And the kids were fun.
Did you feel like you connected with local kids? I mean, do you feel like you belonged, or was there like separation?
No. I think my heart is more Thai than American.
Interesting.
And I felt that a lot coming back to the States. Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I was 11 when we went over, and we stayed in Thailand 5 years, and then we went to the Philippines for the year. And then before, I might have had like 2 weeks in the States before my parents went to Trinidad. So I really didn't come back to the States until I was 18, going into college. And I really felt the culture shock. I was supposed to be American. I was American, but I didn't think like an American. I didn't function like an American. Somehow in my head, I was still Thai. And so I had a lot of culture shock.
What are some examples of that?
I didn't understand American idioms, and I just didn't think somehow the way I was supposed to. I think as a teenager, too, it was challenging because you want so desperately to be accepted by your peers. And when I really didn't understand what they were thinking or how they functioned, I didn't graduate from an American high school. I didn't have a lot of close friends. I just didn't belong somehow. And it took me a long time to process that in my head. In fact, after my sophomore year of college, I just felt like such a misfit. I needed to go home. And so I signed up to be a student missionary, and I wanted to go to Thailand. But of course, there was no opening in Thailand. So the closest I could get was Hong Kong. So I went to Hong Kong, and that year I discovered I'm not Asian either. And so I was really, really confused for a long time. I didn't fit in Asia like I thought I should, and I didn't fit in America like I thought I should. And so it was a long journey. In fact, when I came back from Hong Kong, I pretty much crashed and burned for a while just because I just didn't fit in somehow in my head. But years later, I discovered someone came and says, Nancy, it's not because you don't fit in, it's you think outside the box. Well, then I had to think, well, what's the box that I'm thinking outside of? And that took me a while to process that too, because I was very shy and quiet and didn't feel comfortable talking to a lot of people about things. And there was nobody really to guide me through that scenario of merging back into a culture that I had left. And so then finally someone says, well, you think outside the box, but it's because you're a third culture kid. And that was a new terminology or term that was coming out. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, what does that mean? Well, it's where you've been raised in one culture or born in one culture, raised in another culture. Therefore, you merge the two to become who you are and make you, pull it all together. You've been given the opportunity to have a world view, world perspective, a global view. And when I started wrapping my head around that, that's when I was free. And it probably took me 10 years to get through that process, that whole process, and to be free to be who I am, to be the person God has granted me opportunities, to be who I am today.
What did you do to try to navigate that?
A lot of it was just trying to do daily function, you just go through life knowing that these were the things that were expected of you. I always tried to please people, and if I didn't, that was really devastating. But just to always think outside of myself, because if I thought inside of myself, then it would get kind of bleak. And, I could always make other people happy. That made me feel better and happy too. And so to put a smile on someone else's face was always a blessing.
They talk about some third culture kids having problems going from a more community focused society to an individualistic society. And I wonder if you had any experiences like that, if Thailand is more of a collective society versus American, like individual freedom and all of that, or if, because I don't, yeah.
Well, I think it was really difficult for me to have, to process the materialism that Americans often deal with, the self-centeredness. It was really hard for me to process that. How can you just be, I don't know, we need to reach beyond what we have because we've been blessed with so much. And how can I keep that from, not share it with others and to be responsive to other people's needs? There's such a broad difference between, I don't know, I think I saw it a lot in Thailand when I went back 40 years later, to be able to see the difference between, there's well-to-do homes and then there's this little hovel between, the businesses, and they're just trying to eke out a place to live, trying to survive. How do you bring balance to that? It was just, was a challenge, and you think, how can you balance the playing field for other people?
So you kind of just continue living your life here in the United States, trying to kind of come to grips with the fact that did it just help just to know, oh, hey, this is
that
normal?
Helped a lot, because then I was no longer needing, because I always felt I needed to please. I needed to fit in somehow. Once I knew why I was processing or dealing with these scenarios, then I could say, oh, it's okay for me to think this way. It's okay that I'm different. And maybe maturity, age, played into it too. But it was like, I no longer have to live up to somebody else's expectations or fit into their box, or it's okay to be different, because I am different. And it's okay to be me because God has blessed me with these opportunities and for a reason. And what is that reason? I may still be trying to understand what that is, but as long as I'm listening to His will, doing His will, that's what I want to do. And I think, too, that was important for me to remember that I never questioned where God was in my life. There was always, He was there. Whether I felt it personally or not, there was never a question that He was there. It's just I had to find that as a personal walk with Him as well. So it's a journey.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, I've grown up in the United States my whole life, and changing cultures, even on shorter term mission trips, it can be a shock for some people going to another culture and then coming back to the United States. And so I can't imagine what it was like to try.
I remember at the university, I was advising student she had just come back. I didn't know, but she was at my desk, and we were talking about what classes she should take that quarter, and it just seemed like the conversation wasn't going anywhere. She was so uncomfortable. I'm like, let's not talk about academics right now. Let's talk about, what have you been doing? What are your plans for life? Maybe are you in the right career choice, or degree choice? What shall we do? And she says, well, I just finished a year as a student missionary in the islands. And I got, oh, okay. I said, you're dealing with culture shock. She looked at me. I go, yeah, you've been out in the islands. Now you're coming back and you're having to deal with, and I started naming off some things that she was struggling with, and she goes, oh, this big relief on her face. She says, you get it, don't you? And I realized at that point also, I do get it because I've been there, but I also realized that I still deal with that on a daily basis. It's not
Really?
something that is just, I accept and move on with. I have a difficult time accepting some of the things that, again, the materialism, the self-centeredness, the focus on me, or self-gratification stuff. Those are things that are not acceptable to me in my life because, yeah, how can it be when there's so vast the need out there in other cultures or even within our own country, of people who need things that we could provide for them, but we don't just because we're too complacent or content within our own environment or our own space, that we don't reach outside the box and get out of our comfort zones.
That's really interesting because I was going to ask when you felt like you had completely sort of come to terms with, the differences but it sounds like you still experience that tension all the time.
I mean, true. Some days I get frustrated because I've been sucked into it more than I should be, but not totally. It's still there.
So clearly a lot of work that you did internally over the years. Did that affect I was going to ask something else, but I was just going to ask now. Did that affect your relationships at all, being kind of a third culture kid coming back to the United States?
I think so, because I didn't know how to fit in with my peers because they didn't understand me, and I didn't understand myself really at that point, but they didn't understand me, so of course I didn't, and I still don't have a lot of really close friends that really understand. Fortunately, my husband accepted me for who I am, the crazy lady that I am. But he sees beyond that somehow, and he's, stable. He's there for me no matter what, and lets me be me, and I'm forever grateful for that. But that's rare. It's rare. Most people are, wanting you to fit into their niche or to, I don't know, just.
Yeah. Go Ron.
Oh.
He's here with us.
No, he's there for me no matter. And he's never been in a foreign country, he's well, I shouldn't say that. We went and visited my parents in Trinidad, but he hasn't lived there. No, he was born and raised on a farm. I think that's why I appreciate him, because he was stable, he was solid, he knew where he was self-confident, and I didn't have those qualities at all. And to be able to have that to help me through and navigate was a blessing, a huge blessing.
What I was going to ask is, there's clearly been a lot of work that you've had to do over the years to kind of overcome some challenges of being a third culture kid. What are some of the positives that you have taken from your childhood?
I'm grateful on a daily basis. True, being a missionary kid, my parents didn't return to the States when we came for college. So, they were outside the States for 25 years. They sacrificed a lot. They believed the Lord was coming. Let's get the work done. Everything they did was focused on, making that happen sooner than later. So, although I'm not sure that they could have helped me navigate through some of these issues, because they would have been dealing with some themselves, but and maybe not recognized the same, because I dealt with it differently than my brother Ed, who was 3.5 years older than me. He was an 8th grader going overseas. It was an adventure for him, just 8th grade, high school years, an adventure, whereas I was more immersed in it, I think. and for longer. But the joys, I would not trade anything about the opportunity, having been given that opportunity to be exposed to another culture, grow up in a different country. Sure, there were challenges. There was a time when I didn't see my parents for 2 years. Went away to boarding academy, 14 years old, first time away from home, 9 months straight, and the homesickness was dreadful. But, a lot of things that were life, we accepted them. That was the way it was. But I'm so grateful for having had the opportunity to have experienced that. And I feel blessed that God granted that in my life.
Where did you go to boarding academy?
Well, like I said, I was just started fifth grade when we went over. So I finished 8th grade, through 8th grade there in Bangkok. And then we went to Far Eastern Academy for academy. So I did 3 years there. And that's when my parents transitioned to Trinidad. So I went home to the States. I think it was just maybe 2 weeks. I don't really remember. It was such a blur. And then I went with them to Trinidad. And I think that I wasn't able to return to Far Eastern Academy because we changed divisions. But when we got to Trinidad, we discovered that I wouldn't be able to come back to the States because my parents hadn't been in the division for a year. It was a little hoopla, whatever. So there was a consideration. Of course, airfares were much more expensive then. So I was privileged to do home study my senior year of academy. It wasn't the happiest year of my life. I would have preferred to do other things, but looking back on it, that was an experience too that God used to bless too. I mean, on Friday mornings, my dad would drop me off at the local church and I played the organ, taught myself how to play the organ. So 4 hours Friday every morning. And then on Sabbath, I would play the organ for the church in town. And so I learned skills against what I wanted to do that year. But do I want to live that year over again? Not necessarily, but all things work together for good somehow.
What did you take from your parents' example of
My
servitude?
Parents were very much, like I said, dedicated to the work. They worked at Walla Walla College before we went overseas, and just their commitment to the Lord's work. I suppose at some point, I might have thought that it was overly committed, because I think sometimes as denominational employees, we can have that tendency to the detriment maybe of our children. And yet, looking back now, I'm grateful for that role model, for their dedication to the Lord. Their commitment definitely was a role model that I treasure.
So you finished high school at home in Trinidad, and then what did you end up doing as a career? I mean, what did you study in college?
Well,
You told me earlier you didn't want to be a teacher, so thought
I
about
didn't know it then. No.
Yeah, okay.
I went back to Walla Walla, which was probably a good thing since we had lived there previously, and that's where I maneuvered through. But at least there was some familiar turf. We were close to relatives, although I didn't know relatives, having been away from them for 7 years. But I went to Walla Walla thinking I wanted to be a dental hygienist. And I'm not a strong student in math and science specifically, and I needed to have a certain GPA. And because I was thrown into a lot of math and science while I was maneuvering through culture shock, my grades didn't reach the standard of admissions for dental hygiene school. So I switched my major to home economics, which I knew I could do. And I was determined that I would graduate from college. I mean, that was just a given. We knew Adventist education was critical, even though my parents, neither one have college degrees. We knew that was what we were to do. So I switched to home ec, and I had a secretarial minor, and I thought that I would be a teacher. So I went through an additional year with educational classes too, so that I could get my certification. And my husband, Ron, was a math major, physics minor, so he's very gifted at being a teacher, and he was going to be a high school teacher, and that was where we were going to do. So the first year out of college, we went, and I discovered that you don't put me in a classroom in front of a bunch of high schoolers. It just was not a match made for me, or anybody. But I could do behind the scenes stuff. So I was like the administrative secretary that first year, and later I would do accounting and registrar work on the high school level.
And was there you mentioned that you tried going back as a missionary just to kind of, I don't know, get some normalcy back, or, try to figure things out. After college and in your career, throughout your career, did you have any desire to, get into the mission field again in any capacity?
We did. Ron and I applied to be mission teachers, and it didn't work out somehow. I don't know. It just wasn't meant to be at that time. And so we stayed and worked in boarding academies for 20 years, and that was okay. We felt we worked for the Lord, and wherever the Lord led us, that was where we should work. And we realized too that there's as much a mission field here in the States as anywhere. And so if that was where our mission was, that's where we worked.
Now we're recording this June 2024, and you recently retired. Was that last year?
I retired December of 2021.
Oh, okay. So it's been a few years.
It's been a couple years.
Your
now.
involvement with Maranatha has been relatively recent. How did you get connected to Maranatha?
Well, growing up, I guess more in no, it was even when we were in Thailand, maybe we would hear, because Maranatha started in 1969, and so, of course, we would hear about Maranatha projects going on. And then later, when I was in college, my brother Ed dated a girl who was related to Don Kirkman, who of course is Maranatha all over him. And so very connected with Maranatha. And so it was always, something that was there and present, but and sounded interesting. And Ron and I always thought that when we retired, we would go back to the academies and maybe, stay for a month or so at different academies and just help with special projects. We thought there's such a need, and faculty and staff are just so swamped. They don't always have time to do these special things. So that would be something that would interest the two of us. Well, then when I retired from the university, I thought, what greater thing, but I needed a sabbatical because I worked long hours, and that was my mission, just committing our time and efforts to that. So I needed a break to take care of myself, and I wanted to just take a spiritual journey at that point too. And so I retired in basically the 1st of January, and my brother called me up maybe probably March, and he says, hey, I'm doing a project at Leone Meadows. Would you like to come? Well, at that time too, Ron was still working, and he's looking at what I'm doing in retirement, just staying at home, hanging out, I was doing all these fun things. And he says, I need to retire too. And so he retired the end of March. We went to his 50th Academy reunion that weekend. And the next week we were at Leone Meadows doing our first Maranatha project. And Ron keeps asking me when we're going to retire, because since then, that was in April of 2022. This is our 14th Maranatha project that we just finished. And yeah, he says, when are we going to retire? But I say, hey, this is what retirement's all about. Right? He might have different thoughts, but he's a very good sport.
What was your experience on that very first project? Like, what hooked you?
Oh, it hooked us. Somehow the purpose, or the philosophy of Maranatha, everybody having a common goal. There's something about it that speaks to my soul, that this is what it should be like. I mean, working with people, but still doing service projects, helping. I say we're working in centers of evangelism or centers of influence. We're still able to impact, yes, behind the scenes, but still being able to provide quality facilities for young people to learn and grow in their walks with God. And but it's the people. You connect with people, and it's awesome.
Yeah, especially, and you've been doing all North America projects.
Right.
Brought your RV today, which is what you use to go to all these different projects.
Well, that's a gift from God. Somehow He worked that out.
But it does become a lifestyle for a lot of these people that you've met, that you've made connections with on these North America projects, and it's kind of its own little community that goes from project to project.
It's like my church family, and I have withdrawals when I'm outside of Maranatha projects. It's like, okay, when's the next one? I've got to go and see my people and get connected.
I'm starting to get a little concerned, because I often hear so often from people that it's becoming an addiction, and they have withdrawals when they're not able to serve with Maranatha.
Yeah, I'm addicted to Maranatha, and I'm happy. I don't need a Maranatha Anonymous.
And yeah, exactly. Yeah, we should see if we can get that phone number. Or website, Maranatha Anonymous. You've not only volunteered, you've also led projects. Just here, really fast in the first couple of years of being involved. So why leading projects instead of just being involved? Because that's a whole different.
Maybe I'll blame my brother too, because he brought us in. My husband does computer work, so he got Ron doing the computer spreadsheets, taking care of all the database and stuff. But, my first job was to be this snack lady. So I got to run around camp at Leone Meadows, giving snacks to everybody, making sure they were staying hydrated, and it was warm or cold. You give them hot chocolate, whatever. The best was we had a group of academy kids come from Monterey Bay Academy. And of course, having been in educational environments, I mean, I was in my heyday right there, because they were seniors. I was just finished with Walla Walla. I was on the recruitment role. I was like talking to these kids, but talking life with them. But I also realized there was just joy in serving, and hearing stories from these people, just incredible stories, life-changing stories. It was just great. But then Ron and I realized that there's such a shortage of people who can lead. And we looked back at our skill sets and we said, God pretty much has thrown us into this just because of where we come from, having been in academies and not so much leadership, but administrative type roles.
Those are leaders, yeah.
And although I would do anything and everything to be behind the scenes, I am not an upfront person. That was really outside my comfort zone. I could do one-on-one with people, but to do upfront stuff was totally out of my comfort zone, totally. And So I said, well, I don't know. We can do the organizational piece because that's definitely, being assistant to the principal, you're organizing events, the academy, you're making sure the school is running smoothly on a day-to-day basis. My job at the university was, well, I've always enjoyed jigsaw puzzles, and I figure all of my jobs have been jigsaw puzzles. You're putting pieces together. And my job at the university was to make sure that you met all your degree requirements. You couldn't graduate unless I signed the line that said you met all your degree requirements. And so doing Maranatha projects is kind of the same thing, coordinating. You have people, you have to put them in housing, you need to give them jobs, you need to make sure they're happy. That's what I've done. And so it's like, okay, and Ron has the computer expertise. So, I've done database stuff too, but I let him do that now. And I've just been going around with the snack bag and making sure people are happy. People are
one of the most crucial aspects of the project, making sure people are happy and fed.
And yeah, because if you make sure the people are happy, you'll get a lot of work out of them. And that's what we need to make sure the jobs get done. But we're having a good time, so we just been praying about it a lot. And we said, Lord, if this is what you want us to do, we realize that you have gifted us with this skill set. Therefore, it's not ours to hold on to. Whatever God gives us is to be used to his honor and glory. And so our prayer is that your will, Lord, not ours, your will, not ours.
Was there a moment or a conscious decision that you said, hey, you know what, we could do this, like we could make this a part of our life and do this? Or did it just kind of go from one project to the next and you look back, oh, we've done 14 projects
now? I think because we teamed up with Ed, who was doing project coordinating, we kind of gradually merged into the leadership role. True, we went on a project where he needed to be called away for a while, and so he left us, and we had to finish the project, and it worked. And so we thought, okay, and he kind of gave us a little nudge too, but it was kind of like, it's there, we just needed that little nudge. And if the need is such and Maranatha calls us, then we will definitely prayerfully consider it and see. But it's kind of, we've always said, if God calls you, you better act on that call. It's better that way.
What do you enjoy most about leading these projects?
The people. I love the people. It's a lot of work, just making all the arrangements, being ahead of people, making sure that they're going to have a comfortable, happy, not easy position there, because it's work for everyone who comes, but to make it a positive experience, that's my goal, is that, Maranatha's mission is building people. And that's my goal, or our goal as coordinators, is to build people in whatever way. God, somehow they come to a project for whatever reason, and those reasons vary. How can we make this a growing experience for them spiritually, emotionally, so that they go away better, more connected with God and feel fulfilled.
There's a lot more that goes into a Maranatha project than just, hey, show up and we're going to do this work. It's not just a work bee.
Right.
And you're talking about some of that now. There's a spiritual depth to it that I think is part of the reason that people keep coming back.
I think so. Yeah, there's a lot of work. Like for us, it takes a lot of time ahead, connecting with the local contact people, making sure that, there's going to be appropriate housing, they're going to be fed well. You know, we'll sometimes show up on a project a week ahead of time, just, especially if it's an environment that we haven't been in before, because we want to be well prepared to greet those people and let them know that we're organized, that we have it under control. At least it might look that way. We might not be, but there's a lot. And then to make sure, like you said, that they're having a positive experience, like more than anything. I call Maranatha projects working camp meeting on steroids. Because you're coming in, it's really, you want it to be a spiritual high for them. And hopefully it won't be an experience where they come and then leave and there's a drop in that walk with God or that connection. And so if we can help them maintain that, or just to reinforce or reconfirm that they're quality people, they're people that we value, we treasure, we respect them, we want them there, that they're part of a family, a bigger network, than just, to get them thinking outside the box, so to speak, too, that they have things to share with their world around them and their communities, so that they can go home and continue that, maybe not on a Maranatha project, but within their home churches or within their home environment.
Yeah, that's true. That's unique responsibility of a project leader too, to kind of try to incorporate that. How have you guys, you've been a part of 14 projects. I don't know how many you've led, but you're still.
This would be we've led 3, but we've teamed up with Ed on.
So how are you growing into that role of being a spiritual nurturer?
I'm not sure I'm doing everything right. I pray a lot. And again, it's just God's will, that He will put words in my mouth, and that He will show us those opportunities that, that it's Him. That's all I can say, is that God has to be the one that's doing it, because I'm not capable of that on my own. I truly am not. So we just pray a lot. We've seen so many people's lives changed already on the experiences that we've been at. We have people, and you'd say, some of them aren't the most easy to love. You wonder why they came, but you know that the Holy Spirit impressed them to come somehow. They had a reason to come, whether they had a bad experience on a previous project, but what brought them back to this next project. But they came. They're searching for something, just to be inclusive, included in the group, and to see at the end of the project that they were blessed, that they, wow, I'm so thankful I came, and that's awesome, to see that. Or somebody might come in and say, I just don't feel I have anything to contribute to the project. And you go, oh, but yes, you do. We might not know that right now. And even when they leave, we might not be able to pinpoint a specific as to why they were there, but they were there for a reason, that they'll figure out at some point. And it's just, things don't happen without God working somehow in there.
God does it, you facilitate it. That's holy work that you're doing.
That's what we want to be, is just His hands, His feet, His mouth, peace. I feel like Moses. Not me, Lord. Don't call me to leadership, because I don't have what it takes. But He says go, and He puts words. It works. I need Aaron. I haven't found him yet, but I need Aaron. But it's really awesome to be able, and humbling, very humbling, to be a part of how God uses people. But it's fun, and it's really been a blessing to work with my brother Ed. His life went one direction, mine went another direction, and now 70 years later, to be able to come back together and work as a team has just been awesome. And I tease him, it took him 70 years to figure out his kid sister has some skills. But now we're realizing that the three of us together, just it's fun. He has his role, I have my role, Ron has his, and I work the people, love on them, give them their hugs and their water and their snacks, make sure they're happy. He does photos, Ron does the computer stuff, and it's great.
It's really special. Ed Jensen is also a Maranatha board member, has been for a number of years. You don't have Aaron, but you have a Ron.
I do.
So that's pretty close.
Yeah.
Just one A off. Had to get that in there.
That's cool. That's cool. I'll have to remember that.
Last question. How do you feel that, I don't know, do you feel that you've been able to carry on the legacy of your parents in any way through being involved with Maranatha?
I was blessed to go back to Bangkok about 40 years after we left. And I was so, even as a kid, I was so impressed with the vision that the pioneer missionaries had to start medical work or educational facilities, and to see where it was, in the 60s when we went, and then to go back 40 years later and to see where that work was now, or then, which was still a while ago, almost 20 years ago now, and now to see where it's now in this day. And it's very humbling to be able to be a part of that. But I'm really grateful for the legacy, or for that vision of the forefathers, to be able to have grown up in that environment, and now to be able to carry that on into a future generation. And hopefully my children and my grandchildren will see that too. Is awesome. But more importantly, the commitment that my parents had to the work, to be able to say, yeah, I'm helping carry on, even though we thought it would be finished years and years ago, but to still be faithful, to carry on that work and know that the Lord is coming soon. We want to be ready. We want to finish that work strong, and to be able to be a part of that is humbling. But it's also exciting, and it's a privilege, a gift.
Well, we're privileged that you're part of Maranatha, and that you've been, getting so involved and making such an impact all across the country. And I know that you mentioned you'd rather be behind the scenes. So, and it's a good thing it's just been you and I talking. No one's been listening to this.
It's just you and I.
But I do appreciate you coming and sharing your story. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dustin. I'm honored to be here.